Hello, and welcome back to the Let Me Add to That podcast. My name is Elizabeth Graswich, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Communications at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We are the largest regional education agency in the United States. We serve 80 school districts and nearly 2 million children. We are excited to use this platform to take a deep dive into the conversations surrounding our students and schools in LA County. Welcome back. My name is Elizabeth Graswich, and I am the Executive Director of Public Affairs and Communications for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. I can't believe we are already in May 2023. May is an important time of year, an important month for us because we celebrate and recognize mental well-being and our teachers and our classified staff. With me today, I have two individuals who help us all make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and that well-being is a priority throughout the year. First, I have LA County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Debra Duardo, back with me. Welcome back, Dr. Duardo.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. And joining us in our conversation about Mental Health Awareness Month is Dr. Emily Hernandez, LACO's Director of Employee Assistance Service for Education. Hi, Dr. Hernandez. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. So happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So as we get started, since we are highlighting Mental Health Awareness Month, I'd like to start with a little bit about your background specifically in this area, starting with you, Dr. Hernandez. Can you give me a little bit about your background and your experience?
Sure. Well, my name is Emily Hernandez, and I've been working in the mental health and public service and education field for over 25 years. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and have worked in areas all related to all aspects of mental health, but specifically looking into mental health as it applies to education, working with students, families, communities. And most recently, in the last 5 years, I have really focused my work in working with educators, the mental health of educators. I also work in areas related to community and clinical mental health, working with people that have had several different types of losses, grief, loss, trauma, victims of violent crime, as well as working in the areas with higher education institutions in counselor education, training, and preparation.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And Dr. Duardo, not everyone may know your background in mental well-being. Can you share a little bit?
Absolutely. There probably are many people that are not aware that I started my career as a mental health provider. I provided counseling services for predominantly women who were survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, working for a nonprofit organization for over 10 years in that capacity. I also worked with parents and children that were mandated or court ordered to go to counseling because some of the challenges that they were facing before I became a school social worker. And as a school social worker, I did a lot of work working with students who had poor attendance, identifying any type of barrier that prevented a student from coming to school, also addressing crises with children, suicidal ideation, as well as working with the school community and families.
So we're lucky to have both of you here today on this important topic. You know, this is a topic that has gotten a lot more attention recently. Perhaps we could say that one of the silver linings of a terrible pandemic is that we are finally talking about people's well-being. And so I'd like to just start out with, a question around how does stress, anxiety, and depression impact the workplace? And why is it so important that leaders and organizations address mental well-being for staff?
Well, I think that when we look at issues related to stress, anxiety, depression, and how does it impact the workplace, I think it has everything to do with impacting the workplace in terms of different layers because all of those things are directly connected to our minds and bodies and how we show up in the spaces that we're in and in the relationships that we have. And when you think about being in the workplace, a lot of times we spend more of our time in the workplace and in serving in those capacities than we do in our personal spaces or with our families. And so when you look at stress, anxiety, and depression, it's really hard to kind of decompartmentalize the effect of those things on your body and on your mind and on the way that you and the way that that impacts you. So for a person that's experiencing a lot of stress or experiencing a lot of anxiety or depression, it's really hard to disconnect or detach those things from the way that you just do your everyday activities. So when we look at impacting the workplace, well, it really impacts everything that you do. If we look at specifically educators being in the classroom, it may impact your behavior. It may impact your ability to be empathic. May impact your ability to be more tolerant, to show up, be more emotionally reactive. And so it really does impact all aspects of our life, including the way that we show up in our workspaces.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, it's pretty common sense that if people are not able to bring their best selves to work, if they're feeling mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically challenged, they're going to have a hard time doing their work. People with anxiety disorders, depression, that's going to impact their ability to work with their peers and to actually do the job that they need to do. I mean, just think about it. It would be difficult to do your job if you were having a panic attack, right? So it's pretty straightforward that it has a direct impact on people's ability to work. And I think the other thing is that, we all know that our employees are our strongest and most valued members of the organization. And if we really care about our employees as we say we do, we can't just put words out there, but we really have to demonstrate it through our actions by investing in their well-being, which will lead to healthier, happier, and more productive employees.
And when you think about the challenges that people are dealing with in terms of mental well-being, what would you say are the top three that you're seeing in the workplace today?
Well, in my interactions with a lot of different people, I think many feel a sense of just feeling overwhelmed by the multiple stressors taking place in their life. I mean, many of us, on top of having, a full-time job, have children, spouses, relationships. Some are caring for elderly parents. And it's just a lot going on, Add on top of that the grief that we've experienced from the pandemic, the isolation of being, shut down and not being able to engage with our family or our friends, and some of the financial stress that came along with that has had a huge impact. And when you think specifically about educators, educators feel this huge sense of responsibility of catching students up because of that time where there was learning loss due to students not being able to come to school in person. So, those type of stressors, and if you add on top of that, there were many people, not just in education, but in many fields that decided to retire or leave the profession, leading to shortages in staffing. So those types of things added a lot of stress, particularly on educators. Also, we know that when children experience trauma, as many did during the pandemic, they tend to act out. They don't just tell you, hey, I'm feeling sad, I had a bad day. They'll pick up a chair and throw it out the window. So teachers having to address poor behavior that their students are exhibiting on top of their own trauma and the challenges that they've experienced in their lives.
Just to add to that, the stress and related to returning from the pandemic in so many different areas, just kind of that idea of mitigating learning loss and the overwhelming stress that educators have and everyone that works in the school system. Think about children where they are now and think about where they have been in the last 3 years. There's a lot of critical periods that children have lost. So if you think about children that are coming into first and second grade, many of those children may have lost a lot of very critical developmental milestone experiences that they no longer have when to function in the classroom. If you think about ninth graders who may have lost, their middle school years. And so if we look at development in terms of childhood and adolescence, those critical pieces a lot of times are not there. And so a lot of what we're seeing is like the manifestation of behavior. And when we look at behavior, behavior is communication. And so a lot of our educators may not necessarily be equipped to deal with the communication that is being shared by students related to the learning and social and emotional losses that happened during the pandemic. The other thing is they may also be struggling with their own recovery related to the pandemic, in addition to being able to serve and provide the best environments for students as well. The other thing I was thinking is related to all of, this overwhelming stress. A lot of it is not necessarily always having the best tools in place to be able to manage these plates that are very full. And what I see is a lot of times, particularly in these service types of professions, are people really struggle being able to prioritize their own mental health. Many times we come into these fields to serve, and we give all of ourselves to our work and to those that we're serving, but not always remembering that in order to give our best and to do our best in our service, we also have to fill our own cups and we have to take care of ourselves. And sometimes we leave ourselves to last. And in the times that we are today, sometimes we just never get to it. So by prioritizing ourselves and our own well-being, we're actually able to care and serve others better. The other challenge I think that I'm seeing is also understanding. Like you said, well-being is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and that is one of the good things that has come out, particularly in this post-pandemic recovery period. The importance of our mental health, the more importance of our physical and mental well-being, because we know that we can't show up and to do the work that we need to do if we're not okay. So we want to make sure others are okay. If we're not okay, we're not here to do that work. So understanding the importance of how to take care of ourselves. What does it mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like to take care of ourselves? But then understanding that there's so many barriers to being able to take care of ourselves: time, finances, understanding what does it look like to take care of ourselves. And then also a lot of issues related to access, like particularly when we look at mental health care, all of the barriers that are posed in people's life, beginning with stigma, right? We would like to think that we're not, but we still struggle, and many educators, community members, families still struggle with dealing with mental health stigma and feeling like we can take care of everything on our own and we shouldn't talk to anyone about the struggles that we're having. So those are the things that I think are most difficult and the top challenges that we're dealing with.
Bring up such a great point about the fact that we are a service industry. We're here because we care about people, we care about youth, and so that it is so critical that we also care about ourselves. As we talked about before, we've come a long way in the perceptions around mental well-being and the discussions around that, but there still are stigmas, there still are misconceptions. So what would you say are the misconceptions people have around mental well-being, and why are they missing the mark with them?
I still think there's a stigma attached to mental health. People feeling like if you seek out a counselor, somehow you're weak or unable to take care of your own problems. In some communities, it's just like you're crazy. If you can't manage life and stress, then there's got to be something wrong with you. So I think that's a big part of it, is just that stigma that we should be able to manage any type of situation that comes to us, even real trauma like grief and so much loss that we've experienced. So I think that's a big part of it, is just make yourself strong and deal with it.
I think one of the things in terms of that stigma and where that stigma comes from, and we have to kind of understand, just like Dr. Duardo said, why do people feel like they can't connect, or like they can't engage, or they can't access the mental health system. And I think one of those aspects of stigma comes from meeting people where they're at and understanding we have such incredible diversity in our communities and the people that we serve. And in a lot of the ways that we were brought up, and in our families and in our communities, going to a therapist wasn't acceptable. That's not how we took care of our problems. So I think understanding our communities and understanding culture is a really important aspect to looking at stigma. A lot of times people feel more comfortable with meeting with people in their community, or meeting with someone from their church or their faith-based or something like that. And so when you look at the mental health system, it really is developed within like a Eurocentric model. So having aspects of like multicultural competency to be able to help people to feel like they can identify, connect with, and engage with mental health system is so important, to have providers that understand aspects of diversity and multiculturalism so that we're able to connect with the communities that we serve. And until we do that, then I think, you're not really working with stigma until you kind of create systems that people feel they can connect with.
Yeah, I totally agree with where there's a lot of ways to address mental health and wellness. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to come see a clinician and have a 50-minute session. Some people choose exercise or music, dance, being out in nature, religion are sources that many people use to help with their mental health. However, there are times that even those types of formats are not enough when someone has a diagnosable mental health issue and really needs the support of a professional. And I like what Dr. Hernandez talked about in terms of how the concept of mental health, and it was really kind of looked at as in a pathology mindset.
Right.
Again, that there was something wrong with these people. And I love the idea of being really sensitive to people's cultures and the type of support that they need and they want, and understanding that people should make the decision in terms of what's best for them.
I just wanted to add to that because you brought up such an important aspect of like well-being. And I think that a lot of times when people think of wellness and well-being, one of the first things, like you said, is therapy, which is a really important part. But when you think of like mental health and therapy and counseling, that is looking at one aspect of well-being. But when you look at like a wellness, the dimensions of wellness, there's actually 6 different dimensions of wellness. And one of those is physical wellness and emotional. And so emotional wellness is that part that we think about when we're thinking about like anxiety and stress, because it manifests itself in our mind. Physical is for our body. We know now about this mind-body connection. You can't have wellness with your emotions or in your emotional space without having wellness in your physical. So I think those are, the 2 foundational pieces of wellness and well-being, taking care of your physical, your mind, and your body, and your emotional. But the other aspects that Dr. Duardo just mentioned, like what does wellness look like in terms of our spiritual world, socially, curious, being curious about nature and hobbies. And there's so many other areas that we can fill our lives with that sometimes we neglect because we're not really looking at those aspects of our life to contributing to our wellness and well-being. The other aspect is service. And for us in working in education, we're a very service-driven profession. So sometimes being able to understand how can we find our sense of purpose, our why within the work that we do, because aspects of service also contribute to our well-being and aspects of wellness as well.
Before I transition into what leaders and organizations do to support employees, what are some of the signs that people can be on the lookout to know that maybe someone is struggling, that maybe someone needs a little bit more support and help? What are some of the visible signs in the workplace?
A lot of times it's when you see a change in behavior, somebody that typically is very outgoing suddenly becomes withdrawn, or someone who no longer has the desire to do the things they used to do, have fun, engaging with others. People who are complaining of not being able to sleep and who are exhausted all of the time. Irritability sometimes is something that you can pick up as a form of depression. So those are some of the red flags. Also, I think when people start talking about wanting to give away their possessions and seeming to feel hopelessness are another sign of a red flag.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It's really, you're looking at changes, right? Changes in people's behavior, in all aspects of their behavior, and also sometimes we can be defensive, right? Understanding the way that you experience others, and sometimes when we may have a negative interaction with a coworker or someone in the spaces that we're in, it may feel like, ooh, wow, that didn't feel good. But I think we also need to come to our workplaces and in all of our relationships from a place of empathy and looking at our own emotional reactivity, because sometimes when we're emotionally reactive, it's because something is not okay. So if you're experiencing that with people that you work with the children that we serve, with parents, being able to take a step back, as opposed to being defensive or reactive or saying this is something towards me, being able to take a step back and say, I wonder what might be going on for this person. Maybe they're struggling today. Maybe they're having a bad day. I wonder what might be on their plate. So being able to come to our relationships and in our interactions with others from a place of compassion, and empathy. And I think that can take things a long way.
And, we are so lucky to work in an organization and in an environment in which people truly care about each other. And we know that our leaders care about their employees at their school sites, at their districts, at their offices. And so what are some of the steps that they can take to provide a healthier work environment, one where people are thriving for their employees?
Well, one, as I said earlier, is to invest in these types of services, making sure that all of your employees have access to mental health and support when they need it. But it's also creating a culture where we believe in caring for ourselves. It's the leader modeling that. It's promoting things like meditation and breathing and other techniques to help us to manage the stress in our life. It's also allowing some flexibility and really being understanding and empathetic to the unique conditions and situations in which our employees present themselves. And also having, fun things that we can do together to support one another. I know Dr. Hernandez has put out things like, let's have a dance party, or let's have, a Wednesday wellness day. Let's make sure that we embed some of these healthy practices into our day-to-day, in our meetings. Let's take a moment to acknowledge where we're at and address, an issue that may be coming up from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just add to that remembering our leaders are people too, right? And so while we come to the work in the aspect of leading others, the best way to be able to lead others in this work is to start with yourself. And so you can't really promote things within a school or within an organization that you don't first really believe in for yourself, and that you're not really practicing or engaging in for yourself. And so for me, it really has to do with prioritizing well-being, and it's really about like mindful leadership. And so having awareness about these things, having awareness about how are you showing up, because all of that reflects on your leadership style. And being able to lead teams, you need to. Leadership is very stressful. There's a lot on their plates, and so they have to be able to take care of themselves in order to lead healthy organizations. And so first, it comes with that awareness, being able to be present as leaders, in the good and the bad. And so kind of that concept of being where your feet are. Sometimes we try to be 2 or 3 steps ahead, or we kind of are fixated on what has happened in the past, but also it's so important. That's good for direction and strategy, but when we lead teams, we want to be present. And then prioritizing our own well-being. We can't kind of put these things in place for our teams if we're not doing it for ourselves.
Absolutely. And as we talked about before, teachers, instructional aides, school counselors, social workers, they're all dealing with students who are suffering from anxiety and depression. So how can these individuals in these positions protect their own mental well-being in such a sensitive and busy environment?
It's just what you said, Liz. Teachers, school counselors, TAs, anybody who works on a school campus are people that really care about children, and they're very, very empathetic. And when children come to them with stress and anxiety and grief, they can't help but take on some of that trauma. It's actually called secondary trauma that professionals experience from hearing from the children that they serve that causes trauma within them. So it's so important that they make time for themselves, that they practice some of this self-care that we've talked about earlier, whether it's meditation or exercise or music or dance or whatever helps them to manage the stress and the emotion that they experience day to day. And I think it's also important to know that it's okay to seek out help. And that's why we have these types of programs, that if you're having a bad day or if you're having a few bad days, that it's okay to contact an employee assistance program. That's what it's there for. Take advantage of it and take care of yourself.
Definitely. And I'm so glad that you brought up that idea of secondary traumatic stress and just this concept that we need to use our bodies to be able to make ourselves feel better. I'm a firm believer in using our mind and bodies to be able to regulate our nervous systems. And so going into our classrooms, going into the work that we do, making sure that we are paying attention to, well, what does my nervous system look like today? Because all of that is going to impact the environment that we're in. And so there's really easy things that can be done to be able to regulate our nervous systems, like breath work. The biggest barrier towards people feeling like they can take care of themselves, practicing self-care, all of these things is, number one, this mindset that it takes a lot of time, that it takes a lot of money, or that we have to do these grand events, which most people never even have access to, like massages or facials or a bubble bath, or, those things are fun and they're nice when you're able to have them. But the reality is, for most people and most professionals, they don't have access to all of those things. And so being able to understand that when we practice self-care, it's not about those things, but it can be as simple as focusing on our breath. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It can take anywhere like to 60 seconds. When we talk about meditation, we have this illusion that, we need to be in this, beautiful, serene Zen space, and we need to have a mat and all of these things. But actually, we don't need to have all of those things. We can practice on our breath, and we can meditate in our car or in the bathroom or while we're walking, or from, have in the hallway or before we leave our car. And it doesn't take a long time. And so I think that there's tools that we can use, that people can learn to be able to regulate their nervous systems that you feel immediate effects from. And those are some things kind of that can help in the immediate, and you feel better right away. I like to say that we can't really think ourselves out of when you are experiencing anxiety or having some panic symptoms. You can't think your way out of that. You have to be able to use your body to release some of that out of your system.
I know we've published a meditation that you recorded on breathing on our YouTube channel. It's such a simple way of getting started along that path. And we're so grateful that we have you and have that leadership here at LACO. And as we're talking about LACO, both of you have had an enormous leadership role in making a change for employees across LA County in terms of well-being. And so I want to talk a little bit about our EASE program. EASE stands for Employee Assistance Service for Education. Dr. Hernandez, can you tell me a little bit about what EASE is and its goals and what employees can use it for?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So like you mentioned, EASE is LACO's version of an employee assistance program, and it's been around for a really long time, over 40 years. And when it was developed, it was created to be an additional support for educators. It was developed by educators for educators, with the idea to be able to provide a buffer or added layers of support to anyone that works in the educational system within LA County. And so I came to EASE about 4 years ago, and I've never seen anything like this program. I'm very familiar with the employee assistance programs because as a licensed marriage and family therapist and having my own private practice, I've worked with many employee assistance programs and very familiar to the work. But having worked in education for so long and understanding the needs of those that work in our school systems, to see an in-house version of an employee assistance program that's focused just on the public sector, I think is something that is amazing. And you really don't see this model anywhere, really. And what EASE does is it provides support for those that work in our school systems related to either professional things that might be going on that are impacting them, or personal things. We know, just like the kids that we serve, when things happen in their family lives, in their personal lives, they bring that with them to the classroom. When I start teaching those that are going to be going into counseling, working in schools, I always have them envision students walking through the hallway carrying a suitcase, and sometimes that suitcase might look like a backpack. Sometimes it might look like a roller, those little roller suitcases. And sometimes it might be a trash bag that they're pulling, or a really big suitcase that they're just dragging. And sometimes they can't even pull it. So I have them envision, what are they bringing to school today? What are they carrying in their suitcase, in their backpack? Because all of those aspects we know impact their availability for learning. And so I think about the same thing when I think about those that work in our schools. What are they bringing to work today that might not even be related to their job description? Because we know what happens outside of work is going to impact their work. So through EASE, we're able to provide support in different layers. One, I kind of call it that prevention type of layer, is that we offer a lot of support to districts in terms of wellness and well-being workshops, and also different types of kind of like your base layer of like, how do we take care of ourselves? In terms of looking at more intervention related, we offer a 24/7 hotline, or I like to call it a warm line. Sometimes people feel hotline, I can only call if I'm having an emergency. And so, yes, we are there for people when they're in crisis. But we're also there when people just are thinking about, wow, I think I really need to just start taking care of myself. Maybe I might take that first step. So we have counselors that are available, professional counselors that are available 24/7 to talk with educators when they need some support, when they have no one else to talk to, or when they just need some consultation or guidance, or when they just want to access their services. So EASE never closes. We're open 24/7 for support. Then the next layer is we provide counseling services for people that work in schools. Right now, due to the pandemic, we've been able to expand our services, much at the leadership of Dr. Duardo, which I'll let her speak to. in regards to the expansion, but because of her vision in terms of looking at how it is so important for educators to be well in order to come into this work. We've been able to now provide 5 sessions of counseling for all educators for every 6 months. And that in terms of other EAPs that I've seen, that's very competitive. We also don't have any waiting lists. And so right now our mental health systems are so impacted and they're so confusing. People they have benefits, but might not even know how to access them or navigate the systems in which to get into getting a counseling session. So we try to make it very easy. People call, we connect them with the counselor. We offer telehealth, expanded telehealth services, and we have satellite offices all across the county for educators to be able to connect with licensed professionals. The last component of EASE is that we support districts and schools in the midst of crisis. So when there's a particular crisis at a school or at a community, we're able to support that school and in providing some immediate support, crisis support for the educators that are there. Those schools do a really great job of being able to support students and support families and communities. But a lot of times where districts can come up a little short is where does the support come in for those that are on the first line, for those that are supporting. A lot of times it's just, okay, the crisis is over. Okay, let's regroup back to the next thing or on to the next crisis. And so where EASE comes in is we're able to provide that immediate support for those that are supporting others in the midst of crisis.
People who are listening, who are school employees in LA County, they may be wondering, is this going to cost me anything? Is there a charge? Can you speak to that? And then, perhaps Dr. Duardo can talk a little bit about the expansion and why that is.
Sure. One of the, there's really important parts that we talk to when we talk to employees. The first thing that we say is that it's free. And so I think people, hear a lot about how expensive mental health can be, and it is. But through EASE, this is a benefit that they get as educators, and so they will never have to pay anything within their session benefit or pay deductibles or anything like that. The second part that I always try to communicate is that it's confidential. I think we were talking about that aspect of stigma, and I still think that there is a lot of fear out there, and especially because it's connected to an employee benefit. People want to make sure, the questions are, is my supervisor going to know? Is my principal going to know that I called or accessed EASE? Is my HR going to know? And so we are 100% confidential, and we are bound by law to protect the privacy of all employees. And so we tell them it's free and it's confidential. Your school and your district will never know that you even called to ask a question.
And this free service has all been made possible due to this expansion we were able to offer. Dr. Duardo, can you speak a little bit about that vision and what that involves?
Absolutely. But before I go there, I just wanted to make sure that our listeners understand that when we're talking about an EASE program for educators, we're talking about anybody who works in a school district.
That's right.
So that could be a bus driver, cafeteria worker, custodian, of course, in addition to our teachers and administrators. But I just wanted to be clear that this is available for everybody that works for a school district. In terms of the expansion, coming through this pandemic, and, actually reading about a crisis when it comes to mental health, not just for our youth, but for many adults after such a long period of isolation and our lives being disrupted by this pandemic. We really felt it was critical that every educator have access to mental health services. And it's critical because we know that we can't do a good job taking care of children if we're not taking care of ourselves first. So we at LACO used our funding to provide this program to all 80 of our districts to ensure that every single educator within the county of Los Angeles would have access to these services.
And if a district has questions or needs more information, Dr. Hernandez, is there a way that they can access that?
Absolutely. So we part in rolling out this expansion, and my role in terms of being involved with ease is really about visibility and being able to demystify what ease is and what we're about, but to be present. And to be an engaging partner with all of our districts. And so all they need to do is to reach out to EASE. They can call our 1-800 number, which I'm sure it's 1-800-882-1341. And through there will be two questions. Number one will be push one to speak with a counselor, and you'll be connected to a live counselor immediately. And the other one is to speak to someone in the administrative office. I think it's push two, or vice versa. But by that one number, you'll either be able to reach a live person, either with the EASE office or in speaking to a counselor, no questions asked.
And before we close, coming back to the fact that it is May, it is Mental Wellbeing Month. What are some tips that someone listening right now could do right now, today, to improve their mental well-being?
I think the first step is just paying attention and being aware of your feelings, your emotions, how you're feeling day to day. Being aware of where tension lies in your body, and paying attention to how you're breathing. Because I think a lot of times people don't even realize it. Mm-hmm. We suddenly feel like, oh, I forgot to breathe, and so I think being aware of and paying attention to these things is critical. And then secondly, commit to and be intentional about taking care of yourself. And as Dr. Hernandez said, it doesn't have to be a huge investment of money or time. It could be using some of these breathing techniques, taking a short walk, having some quiet time for yourself, whatever it is that brings you to that place where you feel like you can relax and be present for yourself are things that you can do right now.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think that it all starts there, and from there, it will lead you to, once you have awareness of things, I think then you can begin to work on other aspects. Sometimes, in order to do this work, and once you develop this awareness, you may realize like, wow, I need to develop some boundaries for myself, right? And sometimes we may need to put boundaries around different aspects of our life, including work. And so we may need to put boundaries in our life in terms of our personal lives or around family. We may need to put boundaries in our life around our relationship with technology or with substances. And so, but without that awareness, you're not even able to know that you need to put those boundaries up. And so, again, I just always go back to focusing on mind and body. How are we feeling on mind and body? And a really easy tip to remind people, and I do this every day, is what have I done for my mind today? And what's one thing I've done for my mind, and what's one thing I've done for my body? And if at the end of the day, you're able to answer those two questions, you're well on your way to developing awareness about taking care of yourselves. And with that is also practicing self-compassion, right? And realizing that sometimes that one thing that you need to do to take care of your body might be sleep, right? And so sometimes I think we can be overachievers, even in this area of well-being and self-care, and stress ourselves out because, I'm not doing a good job of taking care of myself. But remember to just meet yourself where you're at, and to meet others where they're at. And that's a really great starting place. And sometimes you're going to be on your A game, and other days, you're just going to be doing the bare minimum, and that's okay. And recharging, recovering, and then starting again.
I'm smiling right now because for all of us type A's out there, sometimes that is the challenge, right? We're actually trying to be perfect and being well. And so, I personally make the commitment for the month of May to forgive myself for not being perfect in my well-being practices. I don't know if there's something that either of you would like to share that you're going to commit to in the month of May to take better care of yourself.
Well, I've been working I've been working on my well-being journey for some time now, and it definitely is not perfect. But when as I meet myself, one of the things I've been working towards doing is walking a mile a day. That used to sound like a great challenge for me. And as I started it, realizing like, oh, a mile a day actually isn't that much. And when you break it down, it really is only looking at maybe, depending on your pace, 15 to 20 minutes of walking a day. If you don't have 15 to 20 minutes, if you walk 2 10-minute intervals a day, you have your mile in there. So that is one thing that I commit to. I've been working on it, but I don't always get to it every single day. But I always do try to do something with my body every day, whether it be walking, whether it be some short yoga or restorative movement, or even dancing or breath work. But the mile a day is something that I would love to get a 30-day in of 1 mile a day.
I think for me, it's just taking the time to slow down. A lot of us get caught up in the hecticness of our daily lives, and just remembering that it's okay to slow down, take a breath, reassess, and have that same level of compassion and kindness that I have for others, for myself, and making sure I allow myself to take that time.
Thank you both for sharing your own journeys as well as your perspectives and wisdom really related to mental well-being for our staff and employees.
Thank you.
I hope everyone has a wonderful month of May in which you take a little bit of time for yourself and commit to doing something for your own well-being.
Please follow the Los Angeles County Office of Education on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Los Angeles COE. That's Los Angeles COE. Or you can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Los Angeles County Office of Education.